All right, welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andy Mack. Let's continue to discuss what's going on in Iran as early on Easter morning, President Trump sent out a series of social media posts, including an expletive-laden threat to Iran, potentially talking about strikes on infrastructure if they do not open the Strait of Hormuz. And this was the post here from Truth Social from the president saying Tuesday will be power plant day and bridge day all wrapped up in one in Iran. There will be nothing like it. Open the effing strait, talking about the Strait of Hormuz. And he moved the deadline back to about 8 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday night Eastern time. That is now potentially the deadline for this, the ultimatum for Iran. Let's be joined right now by research analyst at the FDD, Ahmad Sharawi. Thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. And it feels like we're on the brink of escalation once again with these new threats from President Trump. What does that signal to you?
First of all, thank you for having me. Of course, I mean, President Trump has extended the deadline last week to April 6th for Iran to negotiate and to open the Strait of Hormuz. Until now, we have no indication that the Iranians are doing so or are planning on doing so. All the reporting is indicating that Iran is refusing to negotiate and are putting harsh conditions, conditions that the U.S. would never accept in order to reopen the strait. Thus, I think President Trump, that's why he is doubling down on the threat of attacking the power plants in Iran. But the upcoming 24 hours will be detrimental, as we've seen over the past 2-3 weeks. Usually President Trump opens up on Monday and says that the negotiations are going well or that there are negotiations happening. Where all eyes are on Monday morning to see the status of these negotiations and if anything might happen between the U.S. and Iran.
Yeah, obviously he says he's optimistic that a negotiation would get done, but he did put that deadline out there. You mentioned how these two sides very far apart, and there's not a lot of crossover in some of the demands from the United States, but all as well as Iran. Have we seen them come together in any way? Is there any crossover in some of these points?
Again, I think the Iranians are refusing to negotiate, and they're planning on continuing their relentless attacks against civilian infrastructure in the Gulf, against U.S. bases. So there are no indications that the Iranians are, I mean, at the moment, that they're willing to sit. Apparently, even the mediators, Pakistan, Turkey, and Egypt, have been trying to extend the deadline that President Trump presented. But again, there are no indications that the Iranians are willing to concede on the demands that the U.S. are putting, especially when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz.
And in just terms of the Strait of Hormuz, that choke point is so very vital. President Trump has really told NATO allies to go ahead and get it, saying it's not important, then saying that they need to, an expletive, open the Strait of Hormuz or there will be living hell involved in this. How much pressure is there on President Trump, the United States, to get this strait reopened?
I mean, I think the global impact of closing the strait has been clear. I think oil prices have increased significantly, and with the markets opening in the next few hours, we'll understand the impact of the events of this weekend and how it might affect the decision making by President Trump. But I think if the oil prices are high, then we might see either an escalation or a bigger push towards diplomacy. But again, it all depends on the oil market prices that are, and especially because of the amount of oil that is transported through the Strait of Hormuz. The Gulf states are impacted, the European states are impacted. I mean, in the U.S., it's a different case. I think we have a domestic industry that is capable, but of course, the global economy is interconnected, and so the impacts are felt worldwide.
If this deadline comes and goes on Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern, and the U.S. does decide to carry out some of these attacks on the infrastructure, the critical points of oil in that country, in Iran, what is Iran's response? Are they going to strike other Arab states like they have done previously?
Yes, I mean, the desalination plants in the Gulf states would be in the crosshairs of the Islamic Republic. Oil infrastructure and along the Gulf would be targeted or extensively targeted. But I mean, let me point out that these states have already been targeted by Iran extensively over the past 5 weeks. We saw multiple attacks targeting oil infrastructure and water desalination plants in Kuwait yesterday. But I would assume that if Iran is attacked, then we will see an increase in these attacks against these Gulf states. So instead of one facility being targeted, we might see more drones and missiles targeting these facilities. And let me point out that water desalination plants in small countries like Kuwait and Bahrain are very detrimental to the survival of these states, as in they don't have the storage facilities that can help them sustain themselves. And so if they're extensively targeted, then we might be looking at a humanitarian catastrophe.
Yeah, and obviously so many people impacted in regions that are kind of caught up in this entanglement. But I wanted to get to kind of that point. What are the countries going to be leaning on the United States, the UAEs, the Bahrains, the Kuwaits that are impacted by this? How might that impact their relationship with the United States?
I mean, I think the U.S. has been direct with them, and I mean, we've seen how the U.S. has played a role in the interception, and U.S. air defenses have played an important role in preventing a lot of these missiles and drones from impacting these critical facilities. We've also seen U.S. allies like Ukraine or U.S. partners like Ukraine provide support to these Gulf states in order to prevent attacks on their territories. So the U.S. has played an important role in the defense of these countries. And I think some of them understand the necessity of the fight that the U.S. is taking. And I mean, now, they should understand the lethality of this regime and how relentless it is, and how it's willing to target civilian infrastructure just to inflict maximum harm on them.
Yeah, and we would enter the 6th week starting tomorrow with this conflict. And that is right in the kind of window that President Trump, the White House, has said. Does this timeline in your eyes continue beyond that 6 weeks? And what does that mean to you?
I think President Trump has been clear in his speech on Wednesday that this is there are 2-3 weeks remaining in terms of what to target. And I think this timeline is also dependent on the changes in the battlefield since the start of the operation. Mainly when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz. So I think as long as the U.S. is targeting the military infrastructure and the facilities that enable Iran's war-making ability, then we might be looking at that timeline that President Trump gave on Wednesday. But of course, if things change and there's new intelligence of other missile cities or infrastructure that was not found earlier, then this might be extended. But again, this all depends on what's happening in reality on the battlefield.
And a lot also depends on the capabilities of the Iranian military. And we saw just within the last several days, Iranians, they did strike an F-15 fighter jet. The U.S. had a life or death rescue operation in the mountains of Iran to get them back, to repatriate themselves. Does that mean anything? Does that concern you at all that the capabilities of Iran are showcasing them in this way, that they're able to shut down the Strait of Hormuz? Was the United States surprised by the capabilities at all? And what can you speak to that?
I think there's also been multiple reporting on how many ballistic missiles Iran still has and how many launchers it has. And we've seen during the early days of the war, it was a completely different number. But I think the U.S. has significantly degraded Iran's ability of launching a lot of missiles at one time. But I think we still don't have, at least us who are watching from the outside, who are not privy to the intelligence, see a decrease in these attacks. But Iran is still has the capability of launching attacks, still has the capability of launching drone and missile attacks. And that's why it's necessary for the U.S. to continue this in order to degrade their ability to make war, essentially.
And back to the Strait of Hormuz, because the Iranians, they have put basically a stop sign on that choke point. Is this the new normal for this area? And how likely might they get the Al-Bandeb also involved in this with the Houthis? Are you keeping your eye there?
Absolutely. Bab el-Mandeb remains also a critical choke point, and if that's closed, then we're looking at a major crisis. I think the Houthis have been concentrating their attacks on Israel because it will likely avoid the retaliation unless one of the missiles strikes Israel. So until now, there's been I believe 4 or 5 attacks, claimed attacks by the Houthis, all have been intercepted. I think the Houthis, in terms of their strategy and decision making, understand that closing the Bab el-Mandeb or attacking commercial shipping in the Red Sea will mean the broadening of this war and escalation that would probably drag the U.S. into a war with the Houthis, which I think they don't want at the moment. So for now, I think the Houthis are signaling that they can close the Bab el-Mandeb Strait and that they're still there. But I think moving towards that direction will mean a massive degradation by the U.S. or Israel.
And is that bridge day, that power plant day that President Trump has threatened, could that be the push the Houthis need to get into this conflict?
So, I mean, there's always the chance of the Houthis targeting the oil facilities and energy infrastructure in Saudi Arabia and the Gulf in retaliation for such an attack. But again, I think in terms of their decision-making process, attacking the Gulf states, it would be means broadening the war in which the Saudis might have to retaliate or the Emiratis might have to retaliate. So for now, I think the Houthis are focusing on their attacks against Israel because they understand that attacking the energy facilities in the Gulf states might mean a wider escalation of the war, a risk that they might not want to take at the moment.
And let's talk about Israel a little bit, because they worked in collaboration on the initiation of this Operation Epic Fury, this Roaring Lion, their operation, as they call it. They also stopped some of the attacks in the region where the search and rescue operation is ongoing. Is Israel still in line with the United States on all the goals that they have set forth in these negotiations and potentially also the threats beyond?
I think Israel understands that degrading this regime and its military capabilities is essential for its long-term security. And I think in terms of that, there's clear alignment between Israel and the United States. But also Israel faces another threat coming from Iran's proxies, and that's Hezbollah, who's attacking Israel on a daily basis, Israel's north, as well as the Houthi threat. So in terms of priorities, I think that's where we see that the U.S. is not targeting these proxies in Lebanon or Yemen at the moment. Israel is looking at that front as well and dealing with that front at the same time. But in the overall aims of the war and degrading the Iranian regime and making sure that it can't, again, its war-making abilities to attack the U.S. bases and they attack U.S. interests and attack Israel and attack neighboring states, I think the U.S. and Israel are fully aligned in their goals.
Yeah, and Iran has also said that they don't want to be ever attacked again. That is part of their negotiation, what they want in their demands. But if a negotiation is taking place, if President Trump wants diplomacy, is that something that Israel is fully on board with?
I think all in all, I think Israel understands that President Trump, at least that there's been, in terms of the war aims, that a severe degradation of the military capabilities, the naval power, and the air force were the main goals from day one. And I think with the targeting or Israel targeting some of the political leadership in Iran and the military leadership, that there was a division of labor in terms of the targeting. But I think Israel also understands that President Trump has opened the door for negotiations and that he may have to find a negotiation tactic to end this war. But in terms of even despite that, we're still seeing Israeli strikes. We're still seeing Israeli-U.S. collaboration in the targeting of the military infrastructure, the ballistic missiles and the launchers. So despite all this talk about negotiations, we're still seeing full U.S.-Israeli alignment in terms of the goals in degrading the Iranian regime. But also, as we saw yesterday, Israel played an important role in the rescue of the weapons systems officer that was in Iran.
Yeah, that is a very good point. Ahmad, I just want a last question before I let you go, kind of circle back to the beginning, because this expletive-laden threat saying now 8 p.m. Eastern, or it will be bridge day, it will be power plant day, and we've seen these ultimatums before. Is it likely and is it possible that President Trump could also push that deadline to try to lean into diplomacy?
So, as I said, Pakistan, Egypt, and Turkey are playing or are trying to extend the deadline, according to Arab reporting. As we saw, the deadline was supposed to end at 10 a.m. Eastern on Tuesday, if I remember correctly. Now it's at 8 p.m. The question is, will the Iranians ask these mediators to extend? It all depends on the status of negotiations at the moment. Are U.S. diplomats directly speaking with their Iranian counterparts? Again, these things are usually done in secret and are usually reported after. But I mean, there's always a chance of that extension. It's already been extended once before. It was supposed to be last week, but it got extended until April 6th. I mean, the question is, I mean, in the upcoming hours, we'll understand if this will be extended. 8 p.m. Tuesday is in 48 hours. So it's if the Iranians are willing to sit down and negotiate, and these states, the mediating states, are willing to continue their campaign to convince President Trump of extending it, then we might see an extension. But again, this all depends on all these factors coming in hand.
Yeah, obviously President Trump kind of in his own timeline. So we'll see as this window closes, as we go hour by hour. And like you said, potentially Monday morning, we usually hear from President Trump about exactly where the negotiations stand. So we'll keep our eyes out for that. All right, Ahmad, thank you so much. I appreciate your time here on Live Now.
Thank you for having me.
All right, thank you so much. All right, great conversation there, breaking it all down of where we stand on this expletive-laden threat from the president, talking about them needing to open the Strait of Hormuz, or it will be power plant day, it will be bridge day. And this also coming in from Fox News' Trey Yingst, some of his reporting saying the clock is ticking. President Trump gives a stark warning to Iran while detailing the ongoing negotiations with Fox News chief foreign correspondent Trey Yingst, saying if they don't make a deal and fast, I'm considering blowing everything up and taking over the oil. So we'll see if it is a Venezuela type of takeover. We'll see if they extend the deadline. Lots of different factors at play here.